maintenance. We heard the abutting concerns, and what we wanted to do was try to provide a connection into Anthony Road to take some of the runoff that is going into that wetland and direct it down to Anthony Road instead. So that's what this proposal does for you, this provision. We have now 2 outlet structures that are in this pond. One of them controls both flows that go into the wetland that's located behind 2123 Anthony Road. The second outlet structure goes across and down the Forest Road and tying the Anthony Road drainage system. This results in a significant decrease in peak flow and volume that goes into this wetland. And then all of this drainage eventually, both the structures here and structures here, go further down south of Peter Road and we discharge to a wetland complex itself there. So as a design point as a whole, we're still meeting peak rates as the regulations require. This design has been peer reviewed, and we received 2 minor comments in a letter that was dated yesterday, July 17th. The first comment is regarding this diversion here, these 2. What the peer review would actually like to see is for us to take some additional flow and direct it into this wetland complex. That's their recommendations. We've worked hard to try and address the concern, and we leave that to the board if that's something we'd like to see or not. They don't foresee any problems with our connection into the road. It's just their recommendation. Their second comment is regarding the size of this overflow pipe. We're proposing a 15-inch pipe here, but it eventually ties into a 12-inch pipe. So they're just recommending that we make that 12-inch run the whole way. Because if we have a 15-inch flowing into the 12, that's capacity that will never be seen by that 15-inch pipe because you're restricted from anything really. Both of those comments can easily be addressed. So we think we have a pretty clean review letter from them. And otherwise, we addressed various department comments from the March 31st plan revision. We've resubmitted those, made some changes since then, and resubmitted these as well. We have no further comments on this revised plan, or the previous revision that was submitted from any other town departments. So that's the update I have for you, and with that, I'd like to answer any questions you may have. Okay. Thank you.
Any questions from the board?
I have a question. You just spoke about a 15-inch pipe going into a 12-inch pipe.
Yeah.
If by any chance there was some type of town upgrade where that 12-inch pipe exists now, would it make more sense for you guys to put the 15 in, tie into the 12, and if the town ever decided to upgrade that piping, then we know that it's more than adequate? Would that make more sense?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. We do it either way. Again, those are comments from the peer reviewer. We don't have a problem leaving it as is if that's what the board desire.
Yeah, I'm just curious because if it was ever some type of upgrade, or it's always better to have that 15-inch pipe sitting in there to move that much more water, because that's really the issue, water. So I would think that if it's designed and set up for 15-inch pipe now, I would recommend, or if the board wants to comment, I would think it's probably a good idea to leave it that way.
I looked at the calculations before I came to the hearing tonight, and if we switch to a 12 or leave the 15, it doesn't make any difference in our drainage calculations. 15 just has extra capacity.
Well, then that makes a difference.
Yeah, but as far as just the 12 wasn't pulling that additional flow from the pond, is what I'm saying. So, or sorry, the 15 wasn't conveying additional flow from the pond. And if we go to a 12, it's not going to restrict it. So we can leave the 15 in there, that's not a problem.
Thank you.
Can you say maybe one I think peer review regarding over the January to the left? Thank you very much. Is it just this one versus the other one? Is that the reason, or
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, because I didn't get a chance to speak with them about that.
Yeah, I know this is really specified.
Yeah, I know originally, we had made a change in the plan that diverges is very, very little below this wetland. And they wanted to see more there, because there was just basically almost the entirety of the flows going down here. So then we revised it again to direct even more to this, and I still want to see more going to that wetland. I honestly am not sure the reason why. It does go to the same design points, it's just a matter of how it gets there. Because if you direct more down Anthony Road, it goes through the closed drainage system here, which does surcharge currently for the 25-year storm event, I believe. If we direct that flow to this wetland, then it goes through the neighbor's yard into a pipe and then into the closed drainage system. So it's just a different way of getting to the same point. So I guess I don't really have an answer why we're looking into that.
So that how you don't take the higher elevation in the basin. The primary is sort of the primary.
Yeah, so this would be for low flows going to the wetlands. So essentially what we're trying to do is we can't completely cut off the hydrology going to this wetland and dry it out and have it no longer be a wetland.
Yeah.
So what we did is we matched the 2-year storm event so that that's identical to the development, both in rate and in volume. So that's the flow you're going to get pretty much consistently every year or two. And that'll maintain that wetland complex. So that'll keep the conservation commission happy. But then the peak flows that were really flooding down here we're directing towards Anthony Road to try and help alleviate some of the other concerns with flooding down in this area.
So that means that peak flow is actually good condition. Is that what we're the wetlands less
For this wetland,
acts?
yeah, for every storm above the 2-year event, it's going to be less flow for this one.
What's the, you said, when it goes into the upper wetland there and then it travels, through the, cross Anthony Road, how big is the pipe that it's traveling through there?
There's various sizes. The pipes down here, I believe, are largely 12-inch because they're 2 separate runs. And I don't recall the name of the cross street that they go in, that Anthony and Peter, but there's a run that goes down one cross street, and this run goes down the other cross street. This is 12-inch all the way up to, I believe, a 21-inch at the outlet. But there is a restriction here of maybe about 30 feet of 10-inch pipe, and that's what's causing the surcharge going through there.
Right.
So as Mr. Griffin has spoke about earlier, if this was upgraded going down there, then you reduce that surcharge. Maybe it would be surcharge in a 50 instead of 25. But it's a various sizes, 12 all the way up to 20, I want to say 21 inch.
So do you plan on upgrading that pipe?
So we're not increasing the surcharge event for this, so it's not going from, say, a 25-year to a 10-year event where it surcharges. And the peer reviewer agrees with that assessment. So we weren't planning on upgrading anything except for the 150 feet of 15-inch pipe that we're proposing to tie into the system.
You said that the peer review said you should change that to 12-inch pipe?
Correct, because as this exists now, this is a 15 tiny into a 12-inch, so there's no deep capacity right now.
But would it be possible that would that having that 15-inch pipe would cause that 12-inch pipe to surcharge? Or do you have a part of it both go up to high and low enough so that it doesn't never get that capacity?
Yeah, it shouldn't, because even if we have a 12-inch pipe, we can have the same flow going through there.
Right.
So it shouldn't.
So I have a question. So there was 10 feet you're leaving 10 feet of existing smaller pipe in this plan, right?
I believe it's something like 30 feet, and it's much further down Anthony Road. It's at one of the intersections where it takes a run down the road.
But that's a much smaller pipe, and it's only for a short period, a short distance. And there's no proposal in this to change that and upgrade that existing pipe.
Not right now, no.
Warren, do you think that makes sense to do that? Only because my fear is that, you know, we've only talked about 2-year storms. You know, 2-year cycles, 2-year storms. We haven't talked about any real major runoff. And if there's a said piece of pipe that's smaller that can handle the 2-year storm, I understand what he's saying, but doesn't it just make sense to just, you know, a project of this caliber to say, hey, we have 30 feet of undersized pipe. It makes sense to me that should be part of this project, to take away any other variables that.
There's a couple of considerations here.
Okay.
One of them is that Peter Road and Anthony Road just got completely repaved. Completely repaired, everything down. So to start tearing that road up, probably not a good idea.
Well, I agree with you on that, but
So let me finish. So the analysis done, the drainage analysis done by the applicant as well as by PM2 indicate that pipe will not be surcharged. Is that correct? And whatever it's
For up to, I believe it was the 10-year event.
Yeah.
And I'd like to make a correction here. I just looked at our conditions. That 10-inch pipe is actually 225 feet. So that's actually a big difference there. It was this run here that goes between 11 Anthony Road and 9 Anthony Road. And that's a 10-inch pipe. There's 12s on either end and a 10 in the middle.
So you determined that it's not capable of handling the 25 or 50-year storm.
Correct. Yeah.
So what have we done to mitigate that?
So typically, a closed drainage system is only designed up to at most a 25-year storm event. I know it sounds counterintuitive because we designed a 100-year event from ponds,
Right.
but that's how the regulations are laid out in many towns, North Reading included.
The problem is we seem to have 100-year storms every 5 years.
I agree. Yes.
So that's going to continue to happen. It's hard enough to take that to account. It's like design while we're there.
Yeah. Yeah. So the reasoning was with the flow that we're directing towards here, we're not surcharging in the 5-year event, not making it worse. It's still going to surcharge in whichever was 10 or 25-year event. It's going to surcharge in that same event, so that was the reasoning for not doing the upgrade there.
There was reasoning for not doing that upgrade.
Yes, because it's still going to surcharge in the same event, pre-existing versus proposed conditions. So we're not exacerbating the condition. We're not.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
But you but what you've done though, correct me if I'm wrong, is you tried to split that flow up higher up, so that some of it goes around, because it ends up in the same spot. But the way that it's just how it gets there.
Correct.
Was that an attempt to reduce that surcharge?
That was
that around.
So that was an attempt to reduce the flow that's going to this wetland area, especially in the greater storm events. So after hearing the abutters' concerns and walking the site with Conservation Commission, that wetland stays very wet. And actually, when I walked the site, might have been back in February or March with Conservation Commission. There's standing water that goes into these backyards here. So that brought up some concern that if we're directing so much flow to this wetland, you don't want to completely flood these people out. And we have a closed drainage system in Anthony Road, and if we're not going to exacerbate the issues that are existing there, then why shouldn't we send more flow to Anthony Road? So that was the idea behind doing that, and we've done a few iterations, back and forth with the peer reviewer before coming back to you. And as I said, they still would like to see more flow directed to that wetland. That was one of their recommendations.
But everything directed to that wetland, ultimately has to go through that pipe,
It goes through,
that percentage pipe.
no, this drainage system goes down
Oh, okay, yeah,
That goes
side
inside.
road.
Right.
Over here,
right down to the stuff.
yes. And the difference also being that if we direct more flow over here, it's not a direct connection. Because this pipe starts basically in the middle of their property, and there's a slight ditch that goes and extends towards the wetland, but doesn't quite get there. So we have to come in over top and then go down through that culvert.
Well, I know that area very well. And water has always been an issue. And I know you looked at the existing conditions, the existing things that happen, and that's, they're using that as a benchmark.
Correct.
And not improving it substantially, but just trying to maintain it.
Yeah, I'd say that's accurate.
So I would hope there's the opportunity exists to improve the condition that we would take. Yeah, two was okay with the drainage calcs and all that. Other than the two changes they gave, like two recommendations.
Yeah, those were the only two comments that I raised.
Okay. They've not written them to the report yet. I didn't get it. Let me just do that. I think I'd like to read through that before I decide if that's acceptable way of going about it. And a lot of the subdivisions that managed to decrease the amount of water that people experience through engineering. So I'm hoping that we can see some of that.
Yeah, so we do ultimately decrease the final design point. So it's just trying to balance it between
Quantity or rate?
definitely the rate. I'd have to check the quantity.
Not quantity.
I'm not sure on quantity. I did check that.
Well, we kind of understand what you're doing. It may be very thorough, but I think I want to GM to the report first. See what I think they're at. Okay, is that primarily what you have done? You came tonight to the drainage, what else you have?
Yeah, no, that was really it. Get the commission's input. I know it's been a while since we presented, so
Yeah.
Wanted to show you what we've done in the meantime. And
Yeah, that's good. So I'm going to open this up to the public. There will be some questions. And and as I said, I'm going to open it to the public. Please state your name and address before you ask your question, and all the questions will go through the chair. So go ahead.
I just had a question on Jeff Jones, 16 Anthony Road. So I'm trying to follow this, but I'm looking at the back of the sheet here. So,
Yeah,
so
you heard that.
just so I understand it, basically this new plan is going to put more water coming down from that pipe from that one of those retention ponds or whatever you're calling it, down the pipe to Anthony Road, right? And less over towards the wetland.
correct.
Okay. So that's it. So I understand what you're saying about the abutters concerns about the wetland, but it sounds like you're just moving more water to a different spot, which it sounds like you gotta dig up some of the pipes in Anthony Road, right? From 17 to some part up going up to the top of Havel Street, right?
Yeah,
Some of
so
those pipes are gonna have to be replaced to handle it.
we're installing a pipe. We're not replacing any pipes.
So all the pipes, nothing's gonna be dug up on Anthony Road, just pipes. Just the pipes coming down, you put a new pipe in.
Correct.
That's it. Okay, and that's gonna address the concern. I know one of the peer review reports earlier talked about a concern of the way the water was going to come, if it was going to be pooling on Anthony Road at the first cross street, closer to April, towards the low point. That's going to be adjusted to that in this plan?
Yeah,
Or,
yeah, so what we did is we analyzed the capacity in that system and showed that we weren't going to be exacerbating any existing conditions that are out there currently. And they reviewed that and they're in agreement.
so the pipes that you were talking about replacing, I was trying to follow the 15 or the 16, 12-inch pipe. Those are all pipes that are already, that are going to come down from something to do with the pipe at the end of the day.
Correct, if you want to come up, I can show you.
Yeah, I just turned that. Figured this out.
So we have the pond here, the old going manhole, coming down to a manhole here, proposed manhole, Anthony Road. And this is a 15-inch pipe.
So the water is going to come.
Both. This goes,
They're to the left, right? So this is going to come down. This is going to type it.
yeah, and then I can show you so that would be essentially from this area, to tie into this. Would be what we're proposing for fashion, public down. Yeah.
Just, so this is, I was thinking the new map that you put in the agenda today, but all these arrows for water flow, that's just going rerouted, it's not being everything problem. But when we're in the water line, is just that pipe. So this is just water we're showing now.
Correct, yeah,
So
so
we're gonna redirect.
no, so what this is this is the map that we had to do to analyze the capacity of the system. So A goes to one gas basin, B to another, C to a third.
Does this represent the current water flow line?
Oh, yeah, that's the current sharing one.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Joanne Herrick, 43 Anthony Road. He's talking about only Anthony Road up to 23 Anthony Road. What about the rest of Anthony Road? We're all downhill from this, so there's no talk about that. This water is not going to magically go up the street. I don't get it. So what happens when it goes down the street? I'm at the end. We have no drainage at the end. The drain stopped at 39 Anthony Road. So if you'd like to see pictures, you can see the river coming down. So what's going to happen now? It's going to be a
So
whitewater rafting trip. It's like, I don't get it.
the drainage that we're proposing, and if you'd like to come up, I can show you as well. It's going to be difficult to see, but it's such a small map. But we're tying the drainage systems that are here and here, and it's going across to Peter Road and discharging behind there. There's a big wetland complex that's back here. So it'll go into that wetland complex.
But what about the stuff behind at the end of the cul-de-sac that they're proposing? That water, the water's going out there.
There's very minimal flow that's going that direction. What we essentially have that's going that direction is a small portion of the cul-de-sac, and then some grass runoff. And we're proposing this basin to mitigate that. This house will have a root dry well in it that'll capture and infiltrate for the 100-year storm event. And then these catch basins were installed partly because of that concern. And we're putting in a good length of pipe to tie into the system down here to get that into this basin. So there's very little runoff that's going towards the wetland complex here, which goes down the road to the end of Anthony, as you're talking about.
I'm not buying it. Water goes downhill. And everything where your drainage is all uphill from the parts that really are wet. I think the people that are at like 25, 27, 29 Anthony Road are going to be upset too, because our lots are wet. You don't come down and look at that. We're
Yeah,
wet, wetter than we've ever been. And now you want to go and strip that land, put a road in, foundations.
So we're capturing these roots, all the downhill ones and dry wells to infiltrate that. So this is just going to be grass runoff. And then the road is being captured in the proposed drainage system to go into this pond and then into Anthony Road.
Dry wells absorb into the ground, no?
Yeah, they do. That's what we have to do to meet the regulations that are in place.
And as I've said a million times, what happens if it doesn't work and you flood us all out? Yes, that's a big concern. So should we all sell our houses within 2 years before the 2-year storm thing comes? And we have lakes in our backyards?
This has been peer reviewed many times and they've given it a clean letter. And the engineering department has reviewed it as well, so there are multiple parties. So
Bill, what are you using with the hydrocalc? What are you using for values? Like, was it based on?
I believe it's, Atlas 14, actually Atlas numbers.
No, that's fine. If it's Atlas 14.
Yeah, I want to say that, on the low end, the 2-year event is 3.27 inches in 24 hours. On the high end, it's 8.19 in 24 hours.
So for everyone's purposes, those are the newer values that are even higher than what was accepted just a year ago even. So we're having all our applicants make sure they're all Atlas 14. If that helps you at all, the calculations do take into account a little bit more. What I know there's a couple members here, or I know Jeff, you went down, Leanne actually from the select board went down, and I was interested in talking to Jeff about the visit, and some of you out there were good enough to kind of show Jeff and Leanne around. I've driven through there. I didn't stop and talk to anybody, but just so that I could understand visually what it looks like. But I'm wondering too, you know, from my engineering background, you're having a lot of engineering look at this, and our peer reviewer look at this and find that this works, even giving them recommendations to recharge back into wetlands because you're almost removing too much. I'm wondering if there's like an existing condition that, that is there now that regardless of this development, there's problems in the area that it's almost like you're looking for this applicant to kind of fix kind of the geography that's already pretty bad, that's so wet right now. I'm just trying to be fair to both parties. Like, is it completely the applicant's fault that that you're wet right now, because they haven't done anything, and if what they're going to do is actually going to keep all the water on their site or get it around that, as what you said, to the lower, to the ones above 23. I'm just curious, like, I'm just trying to see both sides of it. Like I'm trying to be fair. That's all, I'm like, because I have family members that have wet properties, and it's like somebody that goes and builds next to them, I would definitely be concerned to make sure they're not adding to it, but it's like they have a wet property and there's something going all the time,
Yeah.
So I just try to be fair about it. To speak in my mind, I apologize.
Yes, sir.
Bruce Reynolds, 27 Montauk. This drainage calculation is all due to rainfall, correct?
Correct.
Okay. What about the 750,000 gallons a year you're going to add by people's houses having water going through them, and we're not including the sprinkler system? That adds to the drainage calculations, I would think.
It does not. We're required to recharge a certain amount of stormwater. And there's regulations only in place for stormwater and recharge of stormwater. And that's what we have to meet.
If you're adding 750,000 gallons a year to an already wet property, so it's going to get wet. Let's be honest, and that goes to her concern that she's got some water now. You add 750,000 gallons a year for your average household usage without sprinkler systems. You've just added more. A sponge can only hold so much. If I add that much more, and it may be a problem with the regulations, it's not figured into that, but it should be. And I think that needs to be addressed. The other thing is you're adding detention ponds. Public health wise, they're mosquito breeders. We have AAA and West Nile virus. How do you plan on proposing if you're making ponds out there that mosquitoes will be able to breed in?
So, again, we have to do that to meet the regulations. And I could check what the depths are on these. I don't know off the top of my head what the low outlets are. A handful of these are intended to be infiltration ponds, and those have to drain within a certain amount of time. If those don't drain within 72 hours, then we have to do something to fix it, because that's what the regulation is. That's to prevent mosquito breeding in there.
Okay, so you bring it into everybody's backyard if they don't drain properly.
Yeah, but then we have to, we're intending for the town to accept this road. And it's been our experience that the town won't accept the road if those ponds don't drain in 72 hours. So we'd be forced to fix that before they accept the road.
Yeah, but the road's already in.
Yeah, but there would be a bond associated with this, and the applicant would like to get on that, so they can be fixing it before it's accepted.
And that's it's a point that I've made in the past many times to drainage calculations, why they don't include the discharge to the septic system on the properties and the drainage tank.
Yeah.
This is the disturbed area.
I'm sorry.
How big is the disturbed area of the belt?
We usually label that, I'm not sure. These are 40,000 square foot lots. These are probably within roughly 100,000 square feet in that ballpark. So it's 2.5 to 3 acres.
Gallons. 2.5 acre feet of water over. The equivalent of like a 3-inch storm once a year.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that flow number is exactly, going to these septic systems. And you are correct, maybe it's an oversight in the drainage calculations, but, or regulations, excuse me. But, it's something that we have to meet. Unfortunately, this is on town water, but not on town sewer, just like the rest of the neighborhood.
Well, again, if they're gonna build 4-bedroom homes, they require them 20,000 square foot lot, but we also zoning wise require 30,000 square foot lot. So if you take a 4-bedroom system on 40,000 square foot lot, that's pretty much will probably absorb it, but still think that it's the multiplication factor that leads their project. You get 5, 6, 8, 10 houses all doing that in the same subdivision that they run for. That's what I think it looks like in that. No, first of all, he was asking.
I'm sorry, can you speak up?
He was asking if we built a bigger septic system that would solve our
Larger field.
with the water out further, but the DEP that frowns on that because it violates the whole concept they have as far as treatment goes. So they want a particular size which is guaranteed proper treatment. So, and if you wanted to go to bigger like 5 bedrooms, you could keep both there, especially in an area that's sensitive. So, okay. Yes, go ahead.
It's at the end of 25 Different Road. Just to follow up on what he was saying, it would be the same. Dave. There's a lot of history associated with this parcel of land. Goes back over 100 years, basically. And I'm one of the original people that kind of came forward back when they were trying to develop it into condominium complexes. The land itself and all of this drainage and the way things are being redeveloped. There's a little history to 346 April Street and the neighbor next door. In that when they did some of this culvert work, they actually cut the wetlands off and created dams and created some of the problem that we're experiencing now because the water wasn't able to get out. And in these 2-year events, which are now happening almost weekly, those roadways that are coming off the Cable Street into those parcels, oftentimes are covered over with water. So there's a tremendous amount of water that drains from the northeast corner down to the southwest corner. So the drop is about 40 feet when you look at the topography. That wetlands that's behind my house, which is 25, 21, 23, 27, that little area where you have your wetlands. And they're trying to avoid it. I appreciate that. The problem is they're going to cut it off again, and they're going to create a ponding effect in that wetlands. So that's our concern right now, is that there's no way that one is going to be trapped in that wetlands. And with all of like what they're talking about with septic systems and roofs and so on, they're basically hot topping half of that acreage. The water's going to go somewhere. So our big concern is I don't want it in my basement. So the water is going to be diverted. And then finding a little map that I can't see, there's one little arrow right behind my house pointing into the wetland. Okay, the drainage flow, that's uphill. I'm at 104 elevation, the top elevation is 128. That's going up there. So I don't know where that arrow is coming from. This grass area that they're speaking about coming off the cul-de-sac, that's going to eventually find its way somewhere. Now, the wetlands is right there. If you look at some of the DEP satellite maps and so on, the wetland is a little bit more extensive than it was portraying on their plans. Where's that water going to go? It's going to be trapped here. Now, between 21 and 23 and 21, right, Jerry? Right. Okay, there is a culvert. So you're talking about maybe making some improvements. Yeah, there could be some improvements if everybody teamed up to fix the problem, rather than just kind of paper over it. Because those two examples out on Havel Street, those long roadways coming in, were very poorly erected to the point where it went into litigation, and there was a lot of discomfort there. And what it did was to trap the water between those roadways and the entire street going all the way up to the corner of Havel Street. So that little area, the 30-foot piece that's coming along all of those houses, all of that water just gets trapped. And it wasn't until they started redoing the street that they realized that there's a red house, and at first, I don't even know, I've lived there 50 years, I don't even know what the street is. But I know Richard's one, Lorraine I think is the other. But in that area, during the blizzard of 78, that one house that's on the corner there had 6 feet of water in its backyard because of the drainage that was coming down the hill and just ponding right there. So I'm very concerned about the engineering aspect of this whole thing, that it doesn't exacerbate the problem, making it worse for everybody. And then you're gone, we're still there. That becomes, I think, the concern of everyone. And even all the way down to the Scott River, you know, whether the town teams up with you to so on and try to maybe environmentally clean that area out so that everything is drained. Down to the Stickney wells, you know, keep in mind, in '86, town meeting, Aquifer Protection Act was formed. We're in Aquifer Protection number 2. Okay, Stub was number 1. So we're right next to it. We were supposed to be a recharge area for the wells. And if you go back and look at some of the history there and some of the discussion between the boards about the cost of water, the quantity of water. It wasn't the cost of water they were worried about. It was the quantity of water. So that's why they did the aquifer protection back in '86 and try to reserve some of these spots so that they're just not pavable. So again, there's no animosity. But the problem, we want the problem solved and fixed. Plain and simple. Some people, it's July, they're still pumping. Regardless of the weather that we've had, they're still pumping last year when we were having a drought. We want that rectified. And the water's coming down the hill. And the hill happens to be on your property. Now, the predecessor here said, well, everybody has a right to build on their own property. I agree. But not when it infringes on my property. So that's why we're very, very concerned about where this is all going.
Michelle De Silva Martins, 19 Mohawk Road. My attorney would like to speak. She's on Zoom if you can access.
Yeah.
Jamie Medina.
You're on mute.
She's muted.
Hello, is it acceptable to the board for me to speak now?
Yes, yeah, we'll hear Chad. Please identify yourself first.
Thank you very much. I'm terribly sorry. There was no place I could find to raise a hand. Thank you all for your service. Some of you I have met, some of you I have not. My name is Jamie Medea, and my client just identified herself. And I'm going to comment as briefly as I can, but most of all, thank you all for serving in your capacity. It's not an easy job. Perhaps the hardest part is there are times when no is the legal and factual best answer. I understood the gentleman who said he wanted to be fair, and I respect very much his qualifications as an engineer. I also respect the gentleman who said a sponge can only hold so much. And as for the right to build on one's own property, that's actually why this proceeding is happening. This is a subdivision, and there is no right to subdivide for 6 new lots. There's by statute, as you all know, I don't mean to sound like I'm lecturing to the board that already knows this, but I wanted to put it on the record. There is no entitlement to this. Perhaps that's why the owners have tried so many times, is there's no entitlement. A full review of the whole thing, not just the changes, is appropriate, partly because it's changed so many times in incredibly important ways. It did begin with zoning compliant lots for this proposal in the most recent iteration, with some questions about one having only a 250 foot little circle for the easement. So far as I can tell, though, it still has 3 waiver requests. And those 3 waiver requests are not minor. They have to do with important public safety. The absence of a looped water main, concerns about the hydrants. And then we get to the exacerbation of existing conditions. This is not a matter of people saying you need to just keep to your own. It's the law that both the volume, the rate, and the flow cannot exceed that of what is there currently. And that's exactly what is being proposed. I'm sorry, were you speaking to me?
Yeah. We've done a lot of subdivisions, so we're pretty clear on it, and actual volume is not part of it, only rate, the runoff is, and is required, so we're pretty clear on a lot of these things. If you have a very particular, a very specific point you'd like to make.
Yes, sir.
Please make it, because there are other people here that would like to.
I will conclude and apologize that I'm not in the room. I would have been had I known this was your setup. I will be with you next time. I will conclude by saying the current proposal is drowning the wetlands and flooding the other side instead of flooding the former side of Anthony. And it's going to be disgusting. It's got gross septic water to be treated by the detention basin and the infiltration basin. After the developer leaves, there'll be homeowners who are stuck with their overflow impacting their neighbors, specifically at 43 Anthony and 25 Anthony and 19 Mohawk and the others in that area. Thank you for your tolerance. I appreciate your time, and I'll see you in person next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, mean, to say that septic is going to be in the detention pond is not happening.
It's not correct.
Yeah, that's-
Yeah, correct. We have individual sewage disposal systems
Okay.
that meet the state Title V regulations for
Right,
each of these lots. Okay.
so.
And then they overflow, and I know I'm to stop speaking. And then they overflow when they're not maintained and they go into the floodwaters that go to other people's property.
In my opinion, septic systems installed under the current law are properly maintained, will last for eternity. So properly built, properly maintained, new Title V law is quite good.
And I'd also just like to point out that having experienced some failures due to various reasons with septic systems, nobody wants sewage water backing up into their house, so they fix that right away. And there's actually a provision to do emergency upgrades and repairs, failing systems for that reason. So in the event, the rare event that would happen, it gets fixed immediately.
Yep, okay. Any other questions from the, yes, ma'am?
Hi, Andrea Paluca, 15 Anthony Road. Thank you, Commission, for your time. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, if I could ask Mr. Hall a few questions. I have a handful of questions.
Yeah, please.
First, the latest designs or the latest plan, we had talked, I think it was at the abutter meeting at Hillview, or another meeting. Where or which map did you include? I think we talked about including our leaching field so that it's 50 feet away from one of those retention ponds. If you could just point that out, please.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it actually even shows up in the proposed plan. I just don't think it's in the area. Yeah, it doesn't show up on the proposed plans because it's just far enough away, but we can expand this to pick that up. We're ensuring that we're meeting that requirement.
Verbally?
Yeah, no, I definitely checked that, and I know we're meeting that requirement because that is a requirement we have to meet. And that was actually one of my concerns with putting basins in this area, was to get the records from the Board of Health for the abutting parcels and make sure that we're meeting those setbacks.
Would it be found in comments on the plans then if it's not in the drawing itself, or where would I find that? Or where would you list that normally to ensure that it's in the document?
I'll revise this sheet here, C5, and we'll expand this area out more to put a label in just to measure that distance.
Thank you. I think you indicated before that the watershed map is a new plan attached. I think you started to explain that. If you could please explain that. It's kind of foreign to me.
So what we had to look at going back and forth between the peer reviews was just how flow was distributed across the site, because we were looking at these in different manners before, but in reality, these systems both end up draining to the same area. So it was a matter of combining that and ensuring that that combination doesn't offset, doesn't increase peak flows that are going to the wetlands that are located behind Peter Road. So that was the major change that we did there, was just analyzing it combined, and then also analyzing the catch basins that are in Anthony Road. So we could do that as well to ensure we're not exacerbating existing conditions there.
So I think you started to say, but E, A, B, C, D, E, which is which?
Those are to the separate catch basins.
Okay. And then you talked about the 225 feet of 10-inch pipe near number 10 and 12 Anthony Road. I believe that's at Victoria Road crisscross. And if you've ever seen it, I think there's wetlands behind or in between those homes. And it does flood, I think, behind 8 as well, pretty substantially. So how would that pipe that's 225 feet long, 10 inches. If we have a 10-year storm or a 25-year storm or a 100-year storm, what happens? What's going to happen?
So in the higher storm events, it does surcharge under existing conditions, so I'm sure you're all well aware. So our analysis that GM2 also reviewed is showing that we're not going to be increasing the problems that are there. We're not going to make it worse. It'll still surcharge for the storm events, same storm events. We're not replacing this pipe and improving the conditions. We're not making them worse. And then as far to the wetland, is this the pocket you were talking about? It's between 9 and 7 Anthony Road on the northern side of the.
I think it may start there and then continues across the street, 10 and 12, and then it's also maybe number 8. There's a lot, I don't know, designated wetland, but I think it actually is behind number 10.
I'm not sure. I can't speak to the other side of the road because we're outside that buffer, so
Okay,
we're not proposing anywhere if we didn't locate those.
but it could impact those wetlands.
I don't think this drainage system goes into there. This wetland goes into a culvert that goes into this catch basin. We couldn't find any evidence of this going anywhere except behind Peter Road to the south. And that's what the town records show as well.
Generally, somebody mentioned to me that rain gardens may be more successful in absorbing water, and just based on your background experience, could you explain the difference between the retention or detention basin versus a rain garden? I think I've seen them around town. They seem to have tall trees and they're very deep. What are the benefits?
So rain gardens are generally a smaller basin. And you use that when you can break up flows more. In the instance of what we have for our proposal, it's difficult to do because we do have to meet setbacks to the septic systems that we're going to have on each of these lots. If we didn't have septic systems, then it would definitely be something that we could consider, like doing rain gardens in the front of these properties and things of that nature. Unfortunately, septic systems make it a little more difficult to use that. The biggest difference between a rain garden and an infiltration basin is you have approximately 2 feet of a amended soil media that's in there that provides a greater filtration before it goes into the ground. But otherwise, they're fairly similar.
I think at one point, I'm not sure if the drawings still say this, but lot 1 maybe was going to be ultimately responsible for the strip of land that would actually abut our property on number 15. Is that still the case? Or do you intend to, will there be an HOA, or who will maintain the retention, detention basin going forward, or is the town supposed to take those on?
So for the basins, our intent would be that the town would take those on. For the strip of land that is a part of lot 1. Yeah, so lot 1 would be responsible for the strip of grass on this side, approximately 45 to 50 foot strip. And then the lot on the other side would be responsible for that. We're providing an easement to cover the drainage basins to allow the town to maintain those.
Then plantings, I think we talked about planting at the abutter meeting as well. You know, we mentioned that verbally, but is that indicated somewhere on the drawings, and is it specified what will go, or is it just?
Yeah, so on sheet 4A and 4B, those show all the plantings. As far as specification, I'm not seeing. Yeah, I'm not seeing a specification on what plantings go through there.
And I think of, the attorney also questioned the waivers. I don't know that we've talked about that much tonight, but I would also ask, either Mr. Hall or the commission, about those. They seem pretty substantial, the 3 waivers. And I'm curious as to why they're typically granted, or why they would be granted, or why they're being asked for when we're talking about homes that will probably be 2,000 square foot or so and go for maybe $1 million or over. And, you know, what is the reason for a waiver if we have public safety concerns? Is it just financial? Is it just the cost, or what is the reason for the waivers?
I could address that. So, one waiver we're requesting is cover over the drainage pipes. The town regulation, I believe, is 3 feet of cover. We're proposing 2 feet, and that's through a run here. And then I believe also an existing Anthony Road. Down here is an existing condition, so we can only do so much down there. And we have this as low as we could possibly go, and you just can't meet the cover because of where it ties in to the existing catch basin. Then in this area, what we're trying to do is just, this is already filled out as it is. We're proposing to fill this area. And we're trying to limit excess fill that's going in that area. And where we have 2 catch basins and a manhole that are right on the very edge of the island, the cul-de-sac, that's a very low traffic area that's not going to be traveled much at all, if any. So if we could save a foot of material and disturb less area overall of the site, we prefer to do that. We could probably bring in a foot more of material, but it just seems unnecessary given the location of those pipes and the traffic you're going to have in that area. And the manufacturer specification for concrete pipe, which is proposed, is only 1 foot of cover. So we're still exceeding manufacturer specifications. Second waiver we're requesting is the requirement for vertical granite curbing. They went through repaved Anthony Road and they put back in new bituminous concrete berm. We just want to match that existing. When you come through here, there's no opportunity to extend this any further. It's going to be a dead end road. We just like to have it be patched. So when you're coming down Anthony, it's all bituminous berm, Cape Cod berm, the whole way in the proposed roadway. Again, if the commission would prefer to see granite in there, then that's a change that can be made. And the last waiver is for the looped water main. So we submitted an attorney's letter with their opinion on access to the looped water main. And what it basically comes down to this is Haverhill Street here with a long strip. So we technically have access through there, although there are wetlands and it's too narrow, but it's technical access. We have 17 Anthony Road, which provides access to this back piece. It continues further down, and there's a lot of record plans that show this strip here as a future street. The law for a paper road of that nature is that if this parcel back here is not landlocked, then we don't have a right to develop through that parcel because we have second access. We can come through here. If we were going to develop through this piece, we would need written approval from 33 Anthony Road and from 31 Anthony Road in order to bring a water main down and through. Further complicating it is the fact that we have this drainage, electric easement, National Grid, that runs this full strip here, 200 feet wide. They don't like to see utilities that run parallel with their easement. If we proposed a water main that came through parallel or at an angle like this, they'd almost certainly deny it. And we also have this wetland here to contend with that goes into this easement a bit. So it's just a variety of situations that make it very difficult to loop the water main. So we really don't have too much of an option. And then the other thing would be, you could theoretically run a main down and then run it back, but that kind of defeats the purpose of doing a loop main when you have two connections within 25 feet of each other or so. So those are the waivers and the reasoning behind that.
For the record, none of these waivers have been approved. They may be on the table, but we haven't talked about them or what we do in regards to yeah. You all set?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Yes.
Brad Hashey, 7 Wyoming Avenue. Have you gotten any reports back from the DPW, the fire department, the police department, based upon the waivers that they were requesting?
They would be the ones that would do the water department and people like that. And we do submit all those to the water department and they do comment on.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
And sometimes they're not in favor of these water loops and sometimes they are. There has to be a useful loop because rather than have them put a loop that's so close together that it makes no sense.
Well, you are aware that Mr. Germino, when he originally owned that parcel of land, which was probably around 18 acres or so, created that 25-foot strip when he culled out 4 acres to build his house. So in essence, he had access for any future water mains or development or whatever, but he created that hardship himself. Now that's part of the same ownership that is currently making this proposal. So they created that hardship.
Again, we present this to the water department and see what their recommendations would be, what they think.
How about the DPW in terms of where that drainage is being dumped onto that was a 12-inch pipe on Anthony Road?
Yes.
Where does that drain go? Where does that drainage go from there? Does it go down to Peter Road?
Yes.
So you ought to get an input from the DPW on what the impact's going to be there.
And I think they've already looked at that. That's something the GM2 looked at too, our peer review engineer.
I think there could be a potential problem down there of flooding people down on Peter Road also.
Let me just for a moment here. And I don't know if you heard me asking before that the existing conditions of the benchmark. In other words, if your house has flooded for the past 30 years and they put the subdivision, the house is still going to flood. Same as it did for 30 years, because they're not addressing, they're not in there fixing something that's wrong with this entire site.
I understand what you're saying, Warren, but he's dumping water from the retention ponds into that system now. This was different from your original plan, correct?
That's correct.
So I'm saying that there could be some impact from that flow, the added flow, which would create a rate of runoff increase.
Well, again, the engineers will be the ones to analyze that, not necessarily the DPW. And they would design something, and a peer review engineer would review it to make sure that it was correct. So in other words, if the problem would come if the piping out of that lower catch basin was the wrong size or damaged or something like that. So having a look at it would not be a bad claim, but I think that they probably have already looked this all over and calculated this all out.
What parameter did you use in the design of the detention area?
As far as
100-year storm, 10-year storm, 5-year storm, what storm?
we're required to analyze up to the 100-year storm event.
So we know that a 100-year storm in today's environment is probably like about a 25 to 30-year storm, right?
Yeah, so we revised the calculations. The original submittal used a little bit older calculations for that rainfall. And we revised that to update it to the NOAA Atlas 14 calculations, which are
So the volume of water that these detention areas have now, have they changed since your original design?
yes.
They're deeper?
I'm not sure if they're deeper, but they're larger. They hold more volume. Yeah.
Hold more water.
Yeah.
So you've taken that into consideration?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, just to
Go ahead.
So we had originally submitted this and we received a whole bunch of comments from all the departments, Public Works, the Fire Department, Water Department, back in December and January. We've revised plans since then, we've resubmitted them, and we've not heard any comments back.
Right.
Just to clarify.
That's essentially what we were waiting for all that to happen. And it may be further revisions of the plan that they may have to renew them again, but we do submit them all to all the different town departments for review. So,
Yes, Reynolds, 27 Mohawk Road in Andover. This happened at your first meeting for this. There was a big debate about National Grid and whether you should hear it, shouldn't hear it, and your attorney said you should hear it. My question is, we've been through this, you've been through a lot of them before, at least 2 or 3 other times. There's always been a representative here from National Grid to sort of explain what their rules are. I realize that he's got emails, but it's all been filtered through him. Why has nobody from National Grid been here to explain what's acceptable on their easements or not? I know when Dana Tower applied, he was, I believe it's approval not required because he met all the conditions on his first meeting, and it was denied. It was withdrawn without prejudice. The National Grid showed up, they sent an email, and they had talks with the board about what they expected. And I'm wondering why this project, where National Grid is involved, and I know the National Grid has to approve this, why they haven't been here to explain to the board what their expectations are.
yeah, I believe that I believe that they're waiting, or actually the way it was presented to us is before they were going to comment on it or give any permission, they wanted to see the approved plan.
But they've always been here for every other meeting we've had. When Tower applied for his house, which was approval not required, and the board got word that he was in the middle of his driveway was in the easement.
Yeah.
And he explained that it's our easement. If we want to put a tower in right where his driveway is, it's his problem to work around it. I think these expectations ought to be set to the board, while we're going through this.
Well, I'm not.
We're talking about detention ponds and everything else on their easement.
Right.
And if they set your expectation to say, no, we're just allowing the roadway to go through, then we're wasting all our time right now.
Yeah, I'm not been privy to the discussion with National Grid between them, but again, we presented this to town council to decide how to move forward. And they said it was okay to move forward. This is not an unusual situation. And that, and I would assume there's some back and forth with National Grid on some of this, or they would never have designed it the way they did. So we say, yes, there's been discussion with National Grid. We can't tell National Grid what to do.
No, that's what I'm saying.
So what we can do is make sure that anything that design goes in, that's gonna go in, it goes in their property. That's a proper design with all the standards met. And then, as long as we do that, and National Grid sees that the town is satisfied with it, then if they have an issue with it, they may want to say, well, no, you gotta do this, or you gotta do that. In which case, they'd have to come back with a revised plan. We have to look at it again. Yes, this is a convoluted situation. It's not a usual situation. It is a little convoluted, but apparently it's not unusual as far as town council.
So then there'll be a vote after National Grid blesses it. After you bless it, they bless it, then you'll do a vote on it.
So depending on how many changes, if any changes they make.
Well, yeah, as I said, if you bless it,
Yeah.
they look at it, they bless it, says it meets everything, then you come to a vote. Or we do a vote after you bless it.
They're gonna want some kind of a level of approval of this subdivision before they're gonna sign on the dotted line.
I could speak to that actually.
Go
So
ahead.
we've been back and forth with National Grid in this whole process. We actually started with them a year and a half before we submitted to the planning board. They've been incredibly difficult to get a hold of. This isn't the first project I've done with National Grid easement. I personally have never seen a representative from National Grid come to a planning board hearing to speak on what they would allow in the easement. That's just my experience. They finally did issue review comments about that same January, February, somewhere in that time frame. This plan before you addresses their concerns. That's why we have short segments of breaks in the curving on either end because they requested that they have access through there. That's why this is graded out a little bit more. They requested that they have access that's less than, I believe it's 12% getting down there. So they have reviewed this and they've made us aware of all the conditions, like these houses can't have decks off the back that protrude into here. They'll put a no parking restriction for this very small section for this lot. But ultimately, what they said is we want plans that are approved by the town, stamped and recorded before we'll issue our assent on this. So they're not going to approve anything until we have recorded plans. And then they'll take a look at it and formally approve it.
And that's what I basically understood right from the beginning.
It's not what happens before.
Well, like I said, this is a little complicated because I've known some of these before myself and not something quite like this. So, so again, but we're following the path, one that we've been directed on. So we'll, our job is to make sure that everything that happens here is okay. Yes, sir.
I have a couple of questions if I can ask, follow up. Jeff Jones, 16 Anthony Road again. So just to circle back to the gentleman's point from Mohawk. So your plan doesn't have to adjust for the septic water, right? That's what you're saying, that you're meeting the requirement. We don't have to deal with the septic. So which I get, that's what you're. So from the board's perspective, can you only enforce what the requirements are, or could you require them to go above and beyond and take into account that extra water?
Well, there's two answers to that. Technically, we have subdivision rules and regulations, and we can require them to meet them to the letter.
Right.
We can ask for more, and it's up to them to say, okay, if they think if it's reasonable, if it's something they can do. And a lot of the developers that we've dealt with in the past have done some special projects for us and made changes that made neighborhoods better. So it's not unusual for that to happen. However, if we go too far, they could sue us. So, and of course, we would lose because we violated our own laws. So essentially, that's the way it is. And that's why I mentioned that the existing conditions are a benchmark. That's where they start.
Right.
And as long as they don't make it worse, it's okay for them to make it better. But as long as they don't make it worse, post development, then that's acceptable by the law.
Okay. And another question on these detention ponds. So, as I understand it, the whole thing, if it works properly, is predicated on those working the right way and the flow going into the drainage at the right rate, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the follow-up I have to the board is, in your experience, this is my concern. You had mentioned about you have to meet a certain rate before when you build it in the town I have no doubt that if this actually happens, you're going to meet that rate. Because if you don't, you really screw something up big time. But my concern is 5, 6, 10 years down the road. Because I understand these have plastic liners in it. Now that you're gone, it's not your problem. I get that. But from the town's perspective, I guess, I don't even know if the board would know this, but historically, what's kind of your experience, the town's experience in maintaining those, or the fail rate? Because I can see those that get clogged up and the plastic liner breaking, and that's all great that this looks good on paper, but
So
then it breaks and then we have to call chaser on DPW to get it fixed for 5 years.
Over the years, because we have detention ponds out there that are 50 years old. Okay, and they're 50 years still work. So you don't see them on the news. They all still work, but the town's been maintaining them. And at one point, we tried to put together a fund of some kind that would make every developer pay into that can be used. But then, it would involve hiring a worker for the DPW to do that, where it gets difficult very quickly as we try to find a way to do it. So essentially, yeah, the town ends up maintaining them, and I think that's what he said. And that's been pretty much the way it is. But they're pretty basic, and they don't they're mowing and keeping them cleaned out. It's not a huge job, and they're pretty reliable as long as they construct properly, and we do. And again, our peer review engineers go out and view the construction of these, certify that they were constructed properly, because if they do need to be constructed properly, if they're gonna allow the proper flow to go through. So. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Michelle De Silva Martins, again, 19 Mohawk Road. We've discussed here many times, I've heard over and over, the benchmark is the existing condition and it should not be made worse. The proposed plan is contrary to that, to my property. They are bringing in, last I saw on the plan, 10 feet of raised, of fill in order to meet the cul-de-sac. My property is literally, if I'm not mistaken, 15 feet from the setback that's required for the cul-de-sac to be built. The runoff of that water is going now directly into my property. Now, there's an infringement now that is occurring, and that is not an existing condition for me. So the catch basin that is occurring is going to cause the water to first run into my property, then go into a catch basin or detention pond, however that is, whichever the name is designed. And therefore, this is an infringement to my property. And the board needs to take that into account because it is not a mere leaving things as it is. Right now, I don't have 10 feet of elevation from a road that's going to drain into my property. This plan does exactly that.
I could address that. So this is the property in question up here. At this property corner, the elevation is approximately 113. This contour line along the curve line of the cul-de-sac is 115. This contour is 110 down here. And we're tying into it here to make a swale going to this basin. So again, we have the 110 that comes out, ties in here. At this point, that's roughly 50 feet away. We have about 6 feet of fill. We do have a little bit more fill here, but that's across the driveway. That's much further away. And again, just tying in these contours as they go down. This corner is 107 down here and a 108. So we're tying in to make a swale along the property line and then going into this basin, which goes into the wetlands. So I would disagree with that assessment that we're directing runoff onto the property. This is higher in elevation coming from this property down into this wetland. That's been verified with sidewalks as well.
I beg to differ. That the proposal that is where he's pointing on the map is directly, it's, may I get up and show the map?
Please.
Is referring to where this is meeting all over here. It's not addressing this cutoff, which is where it's going to be a higher elevation that by default, it's logic of gravity, water's gonna flow. It's going into my property. And now this makes this part of my property unusable. And so that is where there is no such thing as maintaining the status quo with the design that is being built as is, because it is not. That he can't prevent water from flowing on that section. He can on the majority of the curve, but the other section where I just pointed, it's not going to go. Gravity flows downward. And when we're increasing that much fill in order to meet the standards for that road, you are now infringing on my property and use of it.
So we did a topographic survey with people that went out there and located the conditions as they are shown in this plan. Based on that, that's how we did this design. We're showing our proposed contours tying in to create a swale. You have the existing contours coming at this angle, and then our proposed ones coming here. They'll indicate water running down here, meeting in the middle, generally along the property line to go down into that basin. That's how it's been designed.
Okay. Again, if you think that you have to do the engineering, we can just tell them, take a look at that again, make sure that they don't cause that to happen. But so let's say that at some point during the construction it did happen, we would certainly want to know about it because we're relying on this engineer and our peer review engineer hired by us to review all this, make sure that it's done right. And we would send them right out and some kind of correction would be made.
Are they gonna move the cul-de-sac?
If they have to, if they can't make that work, wouldn't be the first time. So, we've had over the years, seen a lot of subdivisions come and go, and it hasn't been unusual for one in the process of being built. And just recently, we had one that was in the process of being built, and we said, yeah, stop them and say, no, okay, this is not working, this detention pond's not working, the water's running wrong, and they had to fix it. So we don't ignore it. If it starts going that way, it becomes a problem. And then we will act on it. So, and it never hurts to take a couple of pictures, you know, and as an existing condition. Okay, yeah.
Except it has a 25 acre road. I'm concerned about the cul-de-sac too, because it's directly behind me. And I'm on the southern curve of that cul-de-sac. If I heard him correctly, he said the berm for the sidewalk will be a little bit lower so that you get onto that proposed grass area. The topography of the road is almost a peak. So half of it's going to run down the Anthony Road, half of it's going to maybe a quarter, I'll under exaggerate, the quarter will run down to that cul-de-sac. Well, if it can't go out her way, and it's going to go out onto that grassy area and probably actually create another wetland right in that area. Because it's not going to, when you think of the snow that's going to be piled up in the curve and all of that, where is it all going to go? Well, if that cul-de-sac is not at least level, it's slightly pitched, as the elevation would suggest, it's all going to flow, and she won't have to worry, because it's not even going to get to that part. It's going to flow into that lot 6, I guess it is, and create a whole new wetland behind 27, 29, and Future Street. So I'm concerned, see, that's what I mean about my concern, is that if it's like this, that's one thing. It's like this, we got a problem.
And that's not what's proposed. What we're proposing is the sidewalk as well as the cul-de-sac roadway to pitch into the center island of the cul-de-sac. We have a catch basin that will convey it to another drain.
Okay, so it's gonna be pushed away, because that whole sand pit in there used to be level. The previous person got caught dredging it out all the way to that point where your lot 5 is. Okay, and the fill was going somewhere else. So again, another man-made catastrophe back there. Not only with 346 and 48, but also with the remainder of Anthony Road. So that's why they have an elevation problems, because they were trenching it out.
Okay, so we're gonna, if there's somebody has some very specific question, I'll certainly take it, but again, this is not definitive yet, this is just an update on the drainage, and again, it's been reviewed by our peer review engineer as well, and I actually have I'm gonna review the whole thing myself and have a couple of questions from maybe our local town engineer. But for now, we'll have another, this isn't the last shot you have at it, okay? That's I think the point, is that they're gonna take this now, we still gotta get a final definitive plan, which will give you another opportunity to look at any of the changes that might be made between now and then. Yes.
Andrea Paluca, 15 Anthony Road. I'm just curious about the peer review. Is it typical just to use one company, and which company did the peer review on the project that had to be halted because of the numbers? There were problems with that project.
I don't know which one. Danielle?
Which project was it that was being?
She doesn't know.
I don't know which project you were asking about, so I don't
The
know.
one Mark was talking about, we said they had states.
Sorry?
Some project had to stop. You mentioned that there were issues with the property around, the water wasn't flowing as it had been predicted by the calculations and the plans. You said the project had to halt. I'm just curious, is it always the same peer review company that you use to review these numbers?
Well, construction. We had a couple of,
That was construction. The plan was right, it just wasn't built perfectly.
but the peer review people do catch this stuff because they go out and inspect as it's being done. They don't just complete the plan and go home. they actually show up and at certain points. And the developer pays money for us to pay the peer review engineer, to make sure that everything's been looked at and signed off. So it's not,
Is that something to be in our purview forum to increase the scope of peer review in terms of site visits? To make sure.
yes, it is.
Is that something we can push back on the developer to say, well, get more frequent attention to this?
Yes, because again, we've had some projects where that's what we had to do because we were running into problems with they were doing something about getting inspected, so we had to increase the number of inspections. In order to make
We should think about
Yeah, I mean, it's what we do is we give the plans to the peer review engineer and they say, okay, based on what I'm looking at, the number of inspection, I think this is what it's gonna cost to do the peer review and inspection. And so we pass that on to the developer. Then if in the process of that, it turned out that we were finding, that the peer review engineer, or the inspecting engineer was finding problems, we could legitimately say, okay, listen, we're finding problems, we need more inspection. We'd have the right to do. Yeah,
First on myself, more. You refer to pre-existing conditions. Okay, how far back do pre-existing conditions go?
okay, so normally what they would do, the pre-existing conditions that they have are the ones that they will have observed when they began the project. Those are the pre-existing conditions.
Okay, because I just heard him say Phil got pulled out of that lot, that area. And I believe it was owned by the Germano family at the time.
Yeah, so what's happened here, what happens is these people became in charge of this project, and so in order to do a plan, they got to go out and do a pre-development review of it, topographic survey and everything to see what they got, what they're working. And those become pre-existing conditions.
Oh, as of when they took over the project.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I'm.
Yeah. So they'll locate places where water is collected and whatever. That becomes part of the pre-existing, and then the engineers take it and decide what they have to do in order to solve those issues.
Okay, so if something was done before those pre-existing conditions, they don't count?
They don't count, because they won't know, how would they know? Okay, so if there's something specific, I'd like to wrap this up. Yes.
I just want to say one thing. I'm not looking for them. I'm speaking for myself to fix the problem we have. We fix it, we deal with it, we know what we have. But if it's worse, then what? And who determines that?
Well, I think, once again, if the conditions change radically during construction or after construction, then yeah, you could definitely, if it happens during construction, we want to know because we have an opportunity to do something about it. But if it happens, say, a year or two after construction, it would be a civil matter.
But we can't sue anybody, so we sue the town because they're in a trust and then the trust is gone and
well,
when they're gone, and that, I just hope the board realizes how many homes are gonna be affected by this, because it's gonna affect Shady Hill and Peter Road as well, and just want everybody to be mindful that we are already there living in established homes. And as she was saying, they're infringing on our properties if they make the situation worse. And well, it's not right.
If you look at the town as a history of building subdivisions and having subdivisions built, find that the vast majority of them end up being built and surviving with no problems for many, many, many years. And continue to be there with no problems. So the vast majority, that's how it happens. So that means the engineering was good, it was properly executed. That's what we're trying to do here, is trying to make sure the engineering is good and make sure it's properly executed. Because how many times have the newspaper say, oh, the subdivision put in 3 years ago has failed? You don't see that. That doesn't happen. Because we put a lot of thought and time into making sure it's done right. And we also depend very heavily, believe it or not, on you guys. Because you know what's going on out there, and you come tell us, and then we say to the developer, well, what have you done about this? And that's what makes this work.
Should we be sending pictures to you guys?
Anything you want, if you want to send, we will take, because we don't always get this much response, so we take it very seriously, don't we believe that, and it does go into the decision making, and when we discuss with them what has to happen. And as I said, we try to push them in the direction, that listen, if you put this pipe in here, will it make it a little bit better, and what does it cost? Can you only do it? They can pay it for a waiver, I don't know, but if you can make your life better, we will. That's it.
Just had one more question. The culvert that goes, I think, on 325, I'm speaking, it goes under Anthony Road, that wetland area. It kind of
Yes.
approaches on the properties. I don't know if those folks are here tonight, but just curious, is there anything that can be done to, it sounds like that's pretty far set back from the wetlands. You really have to have a high flooding event for it to even start to function probably. I'm sure it was designed intentionally like that, but I'm just curious if that could be a condition that we could look at improving that would, obviously you can't drain the wetlands per se, right? But have that be more proactive than reactive.
Yeah, so I spoke with the conservation agent about that, because that was a question that came up in our meeting with the peer reviewer. And she would allow work to within the 12-foot no disturb, but wouldn't allow work further than that to get into the wetland. So I don't think we'd see any improvement from that, because we wouldn't be able to do a direct connection to drain that wetland, and really that's what's going to improve conditions in that.
The irrigations work, so is that when it overflows, it does drain to the pipe and not overflow elsewhere?
Yeah, there's a couple spots where it overflows, but ultimately it overflows into Anthony Road.
Into the culvert.
Into the culvert, also overland and just into the gutter and then into a catch basin.
Is there any way to create like a better swale system that would direct that water to the culvert instead of just overflowing this one?
My fear with doing something like that would be draining the wetland, and then we'd have the Conservation Commission perhaps put an enforcement order on it for altering that wetland, and then we'd have to go back and fix it. So that was the idea also with maintaining the 2-year storm event that's going to that wetland, so we maintain that hydrology there. But it has been considered.
Okay, so do you have an idea when you'll be back with your next?
So from what I'm hearing from the commission, is we'll wait to make any changes to the pipes until you have a chance to review the GM2 comments. And then there were a handful of abutter comments to address on the plan. I think those are relatively minor. We could have those done by the end of next week and have it all resubmitted. There are no other comments that we get from town departments between now and then. So I don't know when that will put us on for an agenda, but you know, the upcoming meetings are.
Our next meeting is August 1st, and the meeting following that would be August 15th. Now, if we're not ready to render a decision by August 15th, we'll need to do another extension. But if you give us a sense of how much more time, you need, then we can figure out whether that's necessary.
Yeah, I mean, barring any further peer review comments that necessitate changes, I think we'd be ready for August 1st.
8 p.m.
8 p.m. Okay, August 1st.
Yeah. 8 p.m. Okay, so that's when we'll get the hopefully all of the comments included in and updated definitive plan. August 1st, 8 p.m. Right, yeah.
Sorry, Andrea, Payuka 15, Anthony Road. Just one more question. I was thinking back, you mentioned the roof runoff and the lot at the end, they'll have a dry well. Is that the only house that will have that, or will each house have and take into consideration the roof runoff and all that?
So there's 3 houses there, these 3 houses here. The reasoning for that is we're bringing in fill on this side of the roadway. On this side of the roadway, we have to bring in fill for the septic system, but we don't have anywhere to put a roof dry well because we have to cut around the back on these. And groundwater was too high. We need a 2-foot separation between the bottom of the system and groundwater elevation. So we don't have any way to get water into a system and meet that separation. So these are the only 2 roofs that don't have roof dry wells. What that does is that makes this pond a little bit larger because it gets treated here instead of on each lot.
But not the one on the right first, and then
These 2, yeah.
the one below that, the detention right straight down below the first one, and then to the left, yeah, that one on the right.
Yeah,
It doesn't go there first?
it may. I mean, half the roof will probably go there first, but then that goes over to this basin.
Right.
But either way, both these roofs are getting treated by ponds.
Okay, thank you all very much.
One quick question. He just made a comment that the groundwater is too high there, yet your report says it's sandy, loamy soil. That seems to be a conflict. How can groundwater be high if you have sandy, loamy soil?
Because that's the classification that's used for the soil. Sandy loam is very common glacial till material in this area. And it's just seasonal high groundwater. If you go through a real dry spell, you might go out there, dig a hole 10, 12 feet, see nothing. When it's really wet, you might go down 2 feet and see sand water in the hole. It's not uncommon to see that. But we go off of when you do test pits, it's called groundwater modeling, where you have the iron that's pulled in and out of the soil because of the high groundwater, it creates a staining in the test pit. So that's how we're able to do a test pit, even in a drought period, and still determine the seasonal high groundwater. And that's again why we have a 2-foot separation, because there is some variance in that because it takes a little time for that to develop. So we have that 2-foot separation in case it's a little bit higher than what was anticipated or what's seen in the test pit.
Okay, no, well, to me, it's a conflict. The wording, sandy, loamy soil, and high groundwater, the 2 don't meet.
That's
Okay?
that's what the class is. It's done off the USDA technical triangle. And
Okay, no, it just doesn't sound right.
Until you go to the beach. right?
Okay, we have another hearing, so we can move on.
Oh, sorry, there's a hand up on the Zoom.
Pardon?
We have a Zoom, I just want to let you know. There's a hand up on the Zoom, I just wanted to let you know.
Can we hear him?
If you mean my hand up, it's a very short question. The gentleman referenced the Conservation Commission and concern for enforcement and 12 feet back. I am unclear, and I hope you could talk about the status of your application to the Andover Conservation Commission for the work you're doing in the wetlands and the alteration on the Andover side.
We're not proposing any work on the Andover side. This property is not extended to Andover, and therefore is out of the jurisdiction of the Andover Conservation Commission. And further, there is no wetland alteration. It is all wetland buffer zone alteration that's being done.
I completely agree with you, but a buffer zone alteration requires an application. And so far as I can tell, I just want to make sure I was correct. You've answered the question. You don't intend to apply to Andover Conservation Commission.
Because there is no work done in Andover, this project, correct?
There's alteration of wetlands. I'll leave this subdivision board going, but the absence of work isn't the issue. The woman who spoke about Mohawk Drive, there's alteration of the wetlands because you're directing so much flow there.
No, that's not what's happening. All right, if you have a further question, if you want to refer to the office, we'll send it. But right now, we'd like to move on. Because we have another hearing.
Bill, can I just make one recommendation?
Absolutely.
A PowerPoint would be really helpful. I struggled and I looked right at your stuff and I have a computer here, so you have a large audience. I think a PowerPoint, in all fairness, because you're pointing and circling and half the people in this room really didn't see or know what you were doing. Sure. You're very descriptive with a lot of your stuff, so that was great, but I think a PowerPoint presentation would just be a positive thing for the people.
Yeah, is that something we can present on the screen? Yeah. Okay, yeah, I can bring that next time.
Yeah, appreciate that next time. Thank you. Not a problem. Thank you, Warren. Thank you.
Private question about
Danielle, motion, we need a motion.
That's just all right. Yeah, that's just. You can hear to the, August 1st, meeting at 8 p.m.
Okay, we need to do that. I agree with that. I agree. We have another meeting.
One second.
That's still our first.
Just want to say thank you for asking for the PowerPoint. That's going to be a big help. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Could I ask you some private question about that in your own?
You're saying it's the brand new parts of it.
Somebody can get to put some structure.
You're singing my song here, like I think so what is it? It says so do they ever go back? Is every imagine town it's down 2 inches.
I don't look myself. You told me the black hat to put it down.
No.
You found it. You bring it to the other. Then when this, the middle goes down, they will do that.
I understand. It's a wait in 1 month, right? It's
But
I think it's a good idea.
We gotta move on.
Yeah, you gotta hear us.
Okay.
Excuse me, we're gonna hear it.
Okay, sorry.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, 66 Winter Street.
Thank you.
I think Jill.
Now we get the street.
Because we got a lot of unregistered vehicles.
Jill, you like this, your 66 Winter Street?
We get any sleep in, Bill?
I was a little nodding, God bless you. Oh, so Luke and I will come over here, so we'll be together. Luke, you want me with you?
I'm just putting the plan up for her.
I don't think we'll want to take the day. So it's time.
Yeah. It's like fine water.
Yeah. You have to wait for this, all right.
Oh, I think. There's a lot of.
Okay, I'm chill. You have this.
Can turn that.
Right? Holy shit. Oh.
Stuff was on my mind, we just didn't get out, John, the house. She brought it in.
Where is the way? That's talking about on this one, Dave.
All right, go ahead.
Well, that's true, too.
You ready?
Yeah, we'll get ready for us.
So, good evening, Jill Mann from Lots of Man and Man here on behalf of Stein Art Inc., the applicant in connection with the redevelopment of property known as 66 Winter Street in Northern Athletic. As everybody knows, this particular property is already existing. It has 2 buildings on it currently. The uses of the larger building were always pretty heavy industrial. It's owned by Heffron, still is owned by Heffron. Basically, Stein Art has an agreement to purchase the property subject to receipt of approval hours. Sign art presently, and here's the principal and the founder is Ed Spinney, and also Chris Spinney. They have an operation in Malden presently on Sharon Street, and they intend to relocate to North Reading. We did receive some comments. I mean, I'm not going to belabor points and go over a plan in great detail because we don't have comments yet from the peer reviewer, and we haven't yet responded to even comments from the department heads and from Ms. McKnight. But I do want to give you just a general overview and then kind of respond to some of the things that were raised, just so that you have them on your radar. So for the most part, again, this is a conforming, not even the most part, it is a conforming lot, but there are certain side setbacks that don't meet. So presently, the existing large building violates side setback. If we're not going to exacerbate the issue, we're just going to leave that as is and do an addition on the other side. We believe we are going to improve conditions of the property because I think if anybody is driven by and or looked at those photographs I included, it's pretty clear that any change is a good change with regard to that property. We will be developing this in 2 phases. The reason is this is going to be, you know, a small business owner trying to develop the property for his own use. So the first matter of business will be phase 1, and that will be to relocate to this particular property, which means the renovations, that larger building, and then the addition. And once that's complete, everything stabilizes, basically financially, they become more balanced. Then they will undertake to take down that. It looks like a house, but it operates as an office. They'll raise that and then put in, you know, state-of-the-art office building, single story though, with about 4,300 square feet. That would be phase 2 though. One of the issues that had been raised by Ms. McKnight and had been discussed originally with the building inspector, Jerry Noel, was, okay, what's the use of this property? Because you hear sign art, well, what are you doing? Why do you need that big building? Well, they need it just because they have equipment that installs signs. They are not a manufacturer of signs. They are a high-end custom developer and creator of signage. So if you go to them and you want, you can see on the website, Mr. Finney actually has hand carved some signs. I mean, he's an artist and he actually designs those displays and works with his customers to do so. We don't manufacture. You can't come in and get 400 signs, you know, for stop signs. I mean, that's not what this company does. That's not it. It is truly a marketer. It works with its customers. And one of the criteria under the business services. So, yeah, when you look at the business classifications and how you would allow what a right use is by right, you list all these categories and you specifically say this is permitted by right, these are permitted by special permit, these are completely prohibited. Under your by right, you actually include something called business services. And when you look at the NAIC, which is that classification district, the 1997 one, and again, I included the excerpt in your file. This company falls under 5, 4, 1, 8, 9, and I can't remember the designations, but basically it's a print company for advertising. It is a sign company. It can paint signs. What it does is it takes a medium and it puts on sign information. That's what it does. At times, does it manipulate the material that is going on? Absolutely, but that's accessory. That's not its business to manufacture and or large scale fabrication. So I believe that is how we are proceeding, and the use is permitted by right. So that was the first question. One of the other questions was simply that some of the other questions were just plan issues. We just need to go through and finish some stuff relative to, you know, dumpsters. We didn't identify it as a concrete pad. Just to give you an example of some of the level comment, because Luke Roy, who is the civil engineer, did a very good job designing the site and showing some of the changes. One of the issues, though, that will come up during the review and will probably come up during this hearing is that we have 2 existing openings. We absolutely need to keep that 30-foot opening that is directly in front of, let's flip this page. That is directly in front of the existing building and is in front of the new proposed bays that we have in this area. So basically the driveway is right here. It just allows us to have more expeditious and direct route to our building. And that's why we're keeping this entrance. It would not make sense to have the entrance here because you would have to have two-way traffic. It does not work on the site. That was also a concern that was raised is, what's going on in this area? It's a 14-foot path. Are you going to keep it? What are you going to do? Luke is actually going to look into that, but we do want to wait till we hear all the peer review comments before we make a whole scale change relative to this particular part. But in conversation with Spinnies, this is not an integral component of their site plan. We do have a huge opening there. We show 48 feet because that's what exists presently. We understand that we're probably going to have to narrow that down. And we're going to work with the peer reviewer to do what we have to do relative to the site. So those were kind of like the more large scale comments relative to the plan as far as the engineering. There are a couple of minor comments with regard to stormwater that Luke can readily handle. One of the other things that got brought up, Dan Mills, he used to sit on this board. He's a traffic engineer and he's actually a resident of the town. He brought up some questions relative to traffic. And again, we've asked for a waiver, not because we're fearful of any report, but because it's already an existing site with traffic, with openings, and this particular use is exceptionally low volume. And I believe initially even GM2 said it really doesn't merit a full the traffic impact assessment, notwithstanding your peer reviewer will look at it, and Luke is more than qualified to respond to that, and we'll do so during the public hearing. But one of the other issues that he had raised or requests was he asked if this particular applicant would install, 360 feet of sidewalk in the area, which is a fairly large burden for this particular business owner to do. Number one, it's somebody trying to simply relocate their business to an area, and it's a 360-foot length of road. It's about 360 on 580. And it would represent a lot of removal of trees in one area. It's not just a simple throw in a sidewalk. It would take grading. It would take a fair amount of undertaking in order to do that. So we are actually not in favor of putting that sidewalk across that frontage, given the level of work we have here. With regard to the fence, there was commentary about a fence, and that actually came from Mr. Noel, because the property owner who is abutting us and my clients have had discussions, and there was always going to be a fence put up. It just never got put on the plan. That's not an issue. And it was requested, and the plan will be shown in the next fence will be shown. We have some minor adjustments to do for landscaping, but essentially we do believe that this plan is fully compliant with the bylaws. We don't have the architecturals in here, right?
Not on this.
Not with but in the package, we do believe though with the landscape plans and with the new architectural plan, that the aesthetic of the building is great improvement. Now we do maintain the garage doors in front because of the way we're looking to have exit from the property. And we will be able to sufficiently screen for them. So we will put in some street trees, and we will landscape in a manner that will provide, you can't block everything, right? But it will most certainly improve the visual aesthetic of the building, because presently you already see three overhead doors, and I can give you that picture as well. We do have somebody working on a photometric plan, and I did give that to you, and it's in your package, but it came very late. So that was one component, and the sign company is going to give you the sign for the building soon. We just didn't submit that. We were going to just do it at the end when we figured out exactly where we wanted to put the signs relative to a pylon sign and then the two building mounted signs. But that again will be in the next iteration of plans. That was a lot, and I did it fast because I know you are probably a little tired from the prior meeting. But if there are any questions you have either of me, of Blue Boy, or of either Spinny, we're here to answer your questions. Thank you.
I do have a question.
Please.
So when I first looked at this, a little while back, we received it. The first thing that came to, and you addressed it, and I appreciate that, is as you look at the entranceway to the right. Yes, that especially. And where there's no traffic review, we're requesting no traffic review. I'm just concerned a little bit about that, because if you look at the business right next to it, and their entrance and exit way is right there. And then if you look right across the street, there's also another entrance and exit for another business. And I mean, when I first looked at that, I said, that's going to be kind of a little wonky, like for entry and exit, and for your business, and then for the business right next door to you, and the business right directly across the street from you. So I just looked at it and I'm like, is there another way maybe to address that? Because
So it's actually, honestly, it's a great question. And Mr. Spinney actually had said something about it previously. This particular entrance, if you will, is really needed only for an exit, because the way they like it is to direct all incoming traffic. You're coming in to have your car wrapped. So this you can do a car wrap, you drive your car in, they wrap it, and then you'll drive out. Various types of companies will come in. They have some equipment they use to install. So they don't necessarily need to come in this way. They just want to be able to come out this way. So those traffic issues do get ameliorated because you don't have those conflicts, because you don't have two-way traffic with somebody coming in and having the conflict. Coming out, you'll have it, but it'd be it's not as frequent as where you have your main entrance, and your main entrances are here, which is in the middle of the property, which basically addresses your concerns relative to the combat between the entrances.
yeah, it just seems like there's a lot of go in and out in that one
Once a
spot.
day at 6:30.
I was gonna say, we could add to that a little bit.
Sure.
We are leaving a small swatch of the front, so we bring.
You just have to say who you are.
It's Benny from Sign Art.
Because the recorder can't see who you are, so you have to tell it.
It's Benny from Sign Art, and we live in town actually, in Harvest Road, Spruce Road. So we will bring our vehicles in from the main entrance. We will go in the back. We will put our vehicles in and do our work, and all the vehicles will actually come out and they'll just go along the front of the building into our parking lot. So they won't even be coming out during the day. The only thing that's going to come out of there during the day in the morning is our own trucks, which we have 3 trucks. When the guys go out in the morning, and when they come back at night, they will come in the main entrance and go in the back way and prep and repair and ready for leaving the next morning. So this building is for our use, so we are controlling the traffic flow, so to speak. So really be very, 3 vehicles a day coming out. Most likely at 6 a.m. in the morning. And then once that happens, all our customers' vehicles, they come in and we put lettering on them, pickups and cars and things like that. They will come out and they'll just drive right along that 14-foot swash in front of the building we're leaving. And they'll park in our parking lot ready for pickup.
Gotcha. I have another question too. So the main building is a 2-story building.
Yes.
And I'm looking at the footprint of the old building, which yes, very weird the way it sits on me. I know it. Are you guys planning on doing a movie there? Or
No.
Oh, only kidding. No, only kidding. But
I guess it's big.
yeah, that was so bizarre. They took the snow out and they put it back, and it was crazy, that whole movie. But another thing too is like, that's a 2-story building and you're only 14 feet off the curb. From the curb to the edge of your building, is that correct? Am I reading that right?
No.
It's the road.
No, we meet the 20-foot setback plus the 14.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, forgive me. I didn't see the 20. I saw the 14.
So we'd be utilizing the 14.
Right, I got you. Okay.
Like jockeying our vehicles around.
Yeah.
So we don't want to use the street.
Right, gotcha. No, I'm sorry, forgive me. I did not see the 20.
That's okay.
Yeah, you got it.
I just have a question. So right now, over on the college, if you're looking in front of the property, there's the old building has the single large overhead, really a drive-in door, right? So you're gonna put 3 in there now?
Yes, so
Okay.
these 2 on the side go away, they're on the side of the building here, and we'll have 3 in this area.
Right, where there's one.
Exactly.
Yep,
And we're actually doing glass doors that are architecturally.
I do see that. And that looks good. Are you able to, since it is kind of the same owner, are you able to look at entries into that strip that is really on the Heavenly Donut side? You know, because if you're talking about trying to screen a little bit better, you don't have any pavement really. You don't have any area in front of the doors to add landscaping.
Well, that's why we designed, the architect designed a very, all nice, all glass doors. Technically, it looks like a glass wall. It doesn't even, nobody would really know they're doors. It's not a traditional door. It's a fully glass paneled, and 3 in a row. It's almost like a storefront. Can you bring up the architecturals on the screen?
They can,
Do you have the active?
Yeah, they were in the package and I thought they could.
Yeah, I know what you're asking.
Okay, good.
is Basically, the edge of pavement is at the property line right there. On the other side of this is a landscaped like mulch area that's part of Heavenly Donuts. That would be off-site as far as additional like screening or
Yeah, that's
planting
all.
there, but
It is, but it's the same owner, isn't it? Or
No,
no? I thought it was that front property or?
yeah, it is.
well, it's not gonna be. We have a PNS on the property.
No, what he meant is, his question was, the owner of your property that you have under agreement also is the owner of the adjacent property.
Yes.
So that's what you mean.
I'm just saying there's an opportunity to kind of provide a nicer screening than what is kind of there right now.
Well, how about, let us look into.
And I'm open, and, Joe,
We appreciate
I'm
these
just
kind of
throwing out
comments.
kind of stuff here.
So no, in Ms. McKnight had asked us as well to kind of enhance the landscaping in certain aspects along the property. So we were going to look into that. So that's another part, and we will look into what we can do with regard to that. What is it, the east, southeasterly side, or northeasterly, right? I can't tell.
The other comment I have is, I do see the hardship with the sidewalk on the left side heading towards the Stop and Shop. I call it the Stop and Shop entrance. Because of the grade there, the trees and all that. So I do see the challenge there. But I do see some advantages. You see the Heavenly Donut ends right at that property line. They have a warning strip ramp down. I think it would be a good idea to continue it along just the island. Because I think it even for your customers, hey, you're working on my van, I'm gonna walk over to Heavenly Donuts. I've got a nice sidewalk to leave the front offices and safely walk down to Heavenly Donuts, have a cup of coffee, whatever, including your employees. Like right now, everyone needs to walk through.
Well, they'd be walking on the new 14
Well, they're
foot
just
strip.
they're walking through your parking lot or where you have cars.
Well, it's not gonna be your car thing, that's the thing.
No, I get it. I'm just saying they're walking through your, I'll call it driveway to be appropriate. They're walking, pedestrians are on driveways, not on sidewalks, and those two things don't. We could, so I think
Revisit
that would
just
look pretty, I think that would also aesthetically look better too. Continuing up to that point, and it would serve your business as well. But I do understand the hardship from that point on. I don't know what the other members here feel about the sidewalk thing, all the way down or not, but.
Well, the thing is we will only own next to the house. So the homes pools, unless you make them go in, and that's gonna end up, if he did put it in, it would stop at the opening for Stop and Shop. And there's adequate, in my eyes, I'm sorry, but in my eyes, across the street, there's a beautiful sidewalk. And that's where the homes are, and that's where people live. They will come out and walk on a sidewalk. There's no crossing sidewalk anywhere to access the new piece we would put in. And we think we could just do a nicer job with landscaping and not endure that hardship of the cost of there probably needs a wall put in there to make grade right for sidewalk. It's a big deal.
Yeah, no question. I agree.
It's a big deal.
But you're not adverse to doing the one along the island right up to the corner of your building though?
I would need to look at the costs. I am not averse to working with the town as much as we can. We want to be a good neighbor in the town, and we've been in Malden for 45 years. We've lived in North Reading for 25 years, and we certainly are not considering moving out. We're moving in. So, my son's taking over the business, hopefully, and hopefully they're here for 45 years. Yeah, when I won't be around.
I have a,
Thank you.
I'm sure you're aware that the garage doors are not supposed to face the street. And I wasn't sure about it until I looked at the picture here. This is the rendering. And what's the reason you couldn't put your garage doors in the back? Because,
Well, there are garage doors in the back. It's a drive-through. So what we do is we would come in our main entrance, we go in through the back door. We bring a customer's vehicle in, we do our work on the vehicles. We would be doing work on 3 or 4 vehicles at a time. So there wouldn't be any backing in, backing out. The vehicle gets done, it gets pulled out, goes along the front of the building over to the back parking lot to pick up. Our vehicles, our service trucks, we're a very large service business where we do service and installation. And our big trucks will be parked in there, and they'll be loaded with like a trailer full of signage that will, that get shipped in and at nighttime and in the morning at 6 o'clock. They open the door and all 3 trucks can drive out fully loaded. And, it's important to us to keep our vehicles inside. Our vehicles are very well kept, very clean, and we want to keep them that way. They're too expensive to replace. So we maintain them very well. And when we load a vehicle, we don't want to have it rained on or snowed on. So, part of this move is that we do not have the space we need to operate it more than anymore. So we tried to design that area specifically to look like a glass wall. So it kind of matches the other corner a little bit. So it really doesn't super look like a bunch of garage doors. If you drive down the street, it's going to look like a nice glass wall. You'll be able to see into the facility. So that's why.
What I think we can do is, honestly, I think with the combination of the architectural component of the design, coupled with the landscaping, I think that you'll find that visually, like the bylaw says, it isn't intrusive. And I think we can accomplish that, and we can show you we can get the architect to give us a snapshot so you'll see what that's going to be like. And it is true that the way the operation works, it's stacking. It's almost like, I hate to say, it's like a car wash. You come in, you drive in, and you pull out.
Yeah, like
So
the oil change
it's-
place,
Okay, so that's what it is. So you stack, and that's why we need to be able to have in out.
well, I'm just concerned because we've required every other place, the garage doors to have them not face the street.
Right, but this is an existing structure that already has 3 prominent forward-looking garage doors that face and are absolutely visual. So in my mind, it's, we're actually improving the situation. And I know that there are a couple of other properties along the street that have those, but I don't, when you think of a garage door, we all know what we're looking at, and those are truly, what do they call it? They call it micro doors or something. That's the new term. And they roll up and they look like glass walls. So I think that the intent, right, was probably to stop the Jiffy Lube kind of places where they truly have garage doors.
I mean, technically, and I realize what the ordinance says, but there was garage doors there next door to us. He has 7 garage doors, and all of them are visible from the road. But the idea of the whole glass thing is it looks like a glass wall, and it kind of matches the architecture of the glass corner. Danielle, there's no way you can bring this up on the big screen so you can see what we're talking about.
I think we all have it though.
Oh, you got, yeah, but
They have it.
Can you describe the finishes? I mean, I kind of get what I think you're using for finishes, but I just want to understand. And again, since you are taking what is an existing condition with the 1 drive-in door, making it 3 on that right-hand side, you're into our world now. So I'm gonna ask you those questions. Like, tell me about colors. You know, is this an IMP panel? Like, what is this corrugated panel? What color is it gonna be?
My son will, he's Chris Spinning, business Chris. Hi, Chris. Yeah, the front office part is where the storefront glass is, that's all insulated panel, with 3 feet of stone below it.
What about above the garage doors, the 3 doors that are on the front?
That's it's some type of metal siding to be determined.
Okay.
They have a wood and batten style.
Yep.
There's 15 different styles.
What color would it be, Chris?
The dark gray and a light gray, so kind of a 2-tone building.
Didn't know if you're going for the Dunkin' Donuts look though, right? You know.
No, okay. So we're trying to look, a lot more high end, and, black standing seam metal roofs, probably be seen in the street.
That
All black window frames.
Yep, that's helpful. Thank you.
So the stone will be, a grayish, New England.
The water table, you mean on the bottom?
Yeah. And the garage doors will be the same, black aluminum frame with all glass to match the stone.
To be careful, the fire department might take over the building over there. So much. Make a deal with them.
Okay, didn't read the public hearing, though, it's not that we have one here, we'll go past that now. That one just kind of ate up all our time. Okay, well, this is the public hearing. Does anybody in the public have any questions?
Hunter Dolesneski, 71 Winter Street, right across the street. I looked over all the renderings. Even with the doors, that's fine with me.
Great.
It's a much better improvement with the low usage of the property. Being, single business.
Yep.
My question would be, how was operation? You mentioned deliveries at night.
Oh,
No.
6 to 4:30. So
Okay.
we're only 6 to 4:30, and we happen to be busy, so sometimes we work till 5:30 or 6.
Yeah.
But
No, that's enough.
4 days a week, Monday through and 4 days a week, and the office is open 5 days a week. So there'll be like 3 people in the building for the Friday, and the rest of the guys.
There it is.
Yep, there it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Danielle.
Is this the one you want to?
And
Yeah, now he's referring to even the architecturals, but just give a little bit more detail, but it's all good.
Yeah, I think
The example drawing -1, the overall rendering has both in it.
I'm sorry, the front overall rendering.
That's the
building base, yeah.
PDF, it's EXD-1.
And you say your name was Hunter?
yes,
Hunter, thank you. That was a very good question. You're doing our job for us, Hunter. We owe you 100. Just ask the hours, like, we should ask. On your job.
and
Get an extra seat here.
I do have a comment about the sidewalk. I think it would be ridiculous to have a sidewalk there. The sidewalk to nowhere.
But Hunter, do you mean, which I agree with, all the way from all the way down, or are you talking just from the Heavenly Donuts to across the island?
Just
So that-
Heavenly Donuts to across there,
You don't think that's needed?
not at all.
Okay.
Going by people and the way they do things. If they're parked in the parking lot, they're not gonna walk out to a sidewalk and down. They're gonna cut across. The quickest way,
there's already a trail in the mulch there.
Yeah,
There's
that's
a there and walks over there.
and that would be another.
By the way, we've never met this gentleman before.
I've lived there over about 30 years. And I just don't see sidewalk going to nowhere.
I'll just be candid. The only way you're gonna convince me of that is if you really come up with a great plan for that island. you know, and not you, Hunter, but these guys,
Oh, I can
because
come up with that.
I do think, like,
I can
again,
landscape that.
to your point, Hunter, is after what we're all been driving by, at least all the time I've been in North Reading, it's kind of an eyesore property, but it is what it is, right? And now I think this proposal is going to improve dramatically the curb appeal of that stretch.
Absolutely.
But I do feel like where Heavenly Donuts has a nice sidewalk and everything, it would be nice to improve also the Winter Street aspect of it by bringing a sidewalk up a little bit more. I'm willing to meet you 1/4 of the way because that's what I'm asking for, because I'm asking for an island. I'm not asking for sidewalk across 300 and something feet. I'm asking for an island of sidewalk with 2 warning strips on each end. So it's really small what I'm asking for, but it will make Winter Street.
Do you have an idea of the length in mind?
Excuse me?
Do you have an idea of the length in mind?
Luke would know that.
Well, you're talking about the whole center from driveway to driveway.
No, yeah, it's just the island.
Right.
100 feet, 100 feet.
I think, I agree, because it does present continuity in that area. I'm looking at the overhead aerial shot. And that island, and I get it, because, what's that?
Well,
Like, who?
is it a granite now?
I don't know.
What is it now?
Like Heavenly's granite.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm talking-
Right now, it's just edge of pavement. Yeah, there's a bit of berm there. Granite curb across the street with that sidewalk.
Yeah.
That would cost.
It adds a lot to the cost.
you know,
The problem with putting anything else there is when the truck plow, unless you have a marker there so they can see where that begins and where it ends, they're gonna take that bituminous out every year.
well, we could,
You gotta put granite more to make sure.
Yeah, we can certainly mark it. It was gonna be all landscape there is what our original plan is. So it would be visible and we could easily mark it.
Yeah.
It's just that this is a large undertaking for us as a small business and trying to make it look really nice and spend the money on the look of the building and the materials and so the sidewalk.
I just wanna make sure everybody's aware what the costs were.
Yeah, it's huge.
I know that figures in.
Yep.
And to do something that would get tore out of the year would.
We would have to do the retaining wall there to do the sidewalk. Like a 4-foot retaining wall. But what he's saying is the plows will take up the sidewalk too.
No, I understand, but it's just not like, oh, it's not, it's retaining walls. Now you're gonna be driving on the street looking at a 3-block wall.
who's asking for that? Are you asking that?
Well,
What you're referring to, like, no one's asking you to do a sidewalk further down, or I haven't heard anybody. Have you?
No, but where you're saying it all slopes down, slopes very, there's electrical. If you do a Google Street View on your computer, you'll see the slope.
Yeah, so come over here.
I have one on the.
It's about 79 feet, by the way. How is that a horrible slope?
Well, we'd have to put up a 2-foot wall or so to that slope, correct?
There's a slope to that. I mean, depending
But
on.
you could just break that back. I mean, that's not. It's both of them that come up and elect.
We'd have to design it. There may be some.
Yeah, we would want to look at it.
Okay.
We don't.
How about, we're definitely gonna take a look. We
Yes,
understand.
that's all I ask. And then I'm in agreement on the other part, as far as just me, can't speak for everybody else, but I'm okay with the other one.
I wonder if those garage doors, I do like them architecturally, but better off with those being, having a film. So you guys might be able to validate that pretty easily, but.
Yeah, and rather, I mean, I get what you're trying to accomplish architecturally, but from an aesthetic standpoint, from a bylaw sense, it's being able to see in and see cars being worked on in the garages is probably not. You won't see that during the day with the lights on. Well, with the lights on, you might not see it, but I mean, if it became an issue after they went up, we certainly could put a film on it, so you. I just think aesthetically, right, the thing's got like glass walls and what's going on inside. Yep, I don't really have a problem. I think it looks nice. Yeah, we keep a really clean place, so we wanted to kind of display that area, you know, so people could see the work we do and things like that. But we're open to that.
Will be doing drainage on this?
Yeah, so I could real quick, I was
going to speak to the stormwater. So the existing site, most of us are familiar with this,
I'm sorry, how many square feet is the site that you would like?
just under 53,000 square
Okay, so
feet.
it's over
Yeah,
a water.
it's almost entirely impervious, as we know, with the existing buildings, and this is all pavement. There's some gravel, weeds, and kind of some small trees and brush in the back. And then this island area here, and then some green space in this area here. So right now, all the stormwater runs off, sheet flows, uncontrolled, untreated. The majority of this area flows onto this adjacent property on 64 Winter. There's a portion of the site that flows towards Winter Street, a portion that goes to this property at the back, and then another small area that goes to the west towards Heavenly. So with the proposed design, we're controlling the runoff, we're capturing it, design low points with catch basins, an oil grid separator tank for treatment, and then a subsurface infiltration system to recharge and drain the stormwater from the site.
2-year design, is that what you're gonna do?
Yeah, we've done the full stormwater analysis for all the storm events, demonstrating that, no increase from pre to post development. We're also directing all the roof runoff from the building into this system, whereas now it's just running right off, right over the property lines. And, now it's going to be much more controlled, treated, big improvement over what's there now.
It's all sand there too, so it'll run away nice.
Yeah, there was a number of test holes done by another company in 2019, 2020. We have all that information. It was primarily showed a sandy, gravelly material, pretty deep water table. So those were all favorable. And that really made sense in why we designed the subsurface infiltration system, because it was something that could be buried, still have separation from water table.
Whereas I know there was gonna be a proposed septic design, but I don't know where, do you know where it's gonna go?
Yeah, so
test over along the back.
we've allotted this area right here for a leach field. And there's several test holes right in that vicinity. We haven't submitted a detailed design yet to the health department, but we've demonstrated that there's a usable area there in the soil to support that. And so that will be forthcoming for the detailed title.
The change in grade.
There's some change in grade, just in the fact that this is addition of this building is all going to be at one slab elevation.
Right.
And right now the grade falls away somewhat from the existing building, so that will be elevated. This area will be elevated somewhat, like a couple of feet. It's not drastic as far as the grading, but
Since you're capturing all your runoff anyway.
there'll be some grading in the back with some retaining wall, because right now there's an area that just runs off to the park behind there. And in order to capture it into our stormwater system, that had to be built up some way. So just in order for the flows and stuff to work, it was kind of inevitable to have to do some of the grading adjustments.
Right. All right. So you're gonna keep that, I know that probably when we send this out for peer review, they'll make some comments on traffic. Maybe we do, and I don't know whether we need a full-blown traffic study on this. But the request may come through, that's all.
I don't see any issue there myself with like site distance.
And I don't think site distance is really it's the multiple access points.
Right.
That is the issue, because cars can come out of the three places at once right there. You know, so in other words, you could have all three garage doors could open at the same time, and three cars that are leaving.
But those cars will never come onto the street. They'll go across the front of the building into our backyard.
They won't have to.
Yes,
But they, you could have them do that, but since there's got such a wide curb cut.
is it just your, so it's the three trucks in the morning that need to get out of that, is that the, someone's gonna?
With trucks with trailers, and the trucks are good size, and we need.
That's what
I mean, if you've gone to the donut shop, we can't even get our truck in the donut shop because the things aren't wide enough, you know?
What are you driving?
We tried, believe me, we tried with that donut shop.
No, we have an Elliott 65-foot crane. We have a bucket truck that's a Peterbilt's. We have 20-foot trailers behind them that we load the signage on, and we have a large 40-ton crane, which is probably 54 feet long.
Okay.
Getting up on that road. But we're not in and out, in and out, in and out. We go out, the guys go out in the morning, they come back at the end of the day, you know. So we're really trying to do the traffic control on our own because I don't need the hassle and the headache. So when the customer does, you know, we stack our customers. No customer will ever drive out of our building. My guys bring them out and then bring them right across the front of the building to the side of the building or the back for a pickup. So we wouldn't try to curtail too much, really, hardly any traffic coming out of there. And if need be, we could say do not enter.
Well, I was gonna say sign it.
I mean, I know a guy who can make the sign, so it's
That's good. That's good.
Well, I mean, that was where I was actually thinking about,
yeah, I would not want to overburden the site with all kinds of signage, but if it's
No.
needed,
but I think that if you could, use signage to control a portion of that.
Yep.
I think, and I think you should tell them you can have it put it on the plan.
okay.
You know, because, you know, you may be doing yourself a favor because it may eliminate the requests for.
Yep. Yep. I mean, we don't want anybody entering there.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, you see what I mean?
Yeah,
You know,
I do. Yep.
because if you say, well, I didn't do anything, they're gonna say, okay, now we want a traffic study.
Right. You know, that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, but with signage, you can control it, say, no, we gotta control the signage.
Yep.
And you're gonna be dealing with primarily professional people, because if you're dealing with people on 128, they don't pay any attention to signs.
Yeah. Well, most people that we sell them to don't pay attention to them either.
Yeah. Well, no, so I think that's the answer, because there was some discussion about that, but I think that's the answer for it.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion and a thought that we had, but we don't like to oversign, but you know,
No, no.
I think that might be needed.
And you know, and of course, you know, directional signs are not governed, so.
That's good.
So.
I saw that a lot, right?
Yes, so you do that, right? And you've got to put some trees up.
Put trees up, yeah.
And do we have I don't know if I have
We should have a plan.
a landscape plan?
We do have a landscape plan,
Yep.
as Ms. Knight noted, we didn't put street tree, we need to enhance the landscape plan, but we do have some.
Behind the office building, you got some trees there, but there's gonna be a fence there too?
There's.
Be a fence on this,
Okay.
Well, I wanted to just address that a little bit.
Okay.
Could it be a living fence with a small wall and trees?
Yeah.
Or does it have to be a fence? We're just looking to not drive through the site.
Well, first of all, if you try to plant trees in that sand, they're not gonna last because they can't get the water. The water's too far down and the soil is too dry.
Well, the bylaws here require watering, so you could. Yeah, I was gonna say, if we put trees, I'm not gonna let them die because they're expensive, so.
Well, I'm just,
We'll put a system in.
I've been in this business for a long time. I'm just trying to point out some things for you so you think about it. That's all.
I think the abutting property owner wanted a living fence, is that correct?
Right now, with my P&S, we have an agreement to get with home schools and discuss a separation, whether it be a raised bed with trees in it, shrubbery, or it be a fence. So I only have 50% of the say there,
Yeah.
but we all want a separation so people can't whiz in mine and go through to his. No question.
We'd like to know what ultimately you're gonna do there, okay?
But I'm gonna meet with Homes this week, so for our next meeting, we'll have that completely situation.
But in my opinion, you know, any kind of a separation is probably gonna be, would be acceptable. I think we're gonna work out with him, so.
Great.
I'd be a much bigger fan of a live fence than anything else.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I think it would look nice.
if he doesn't want to see the back of your building, you might end up with something different, so. I mean, I don't think there's gonna.
Well, to date, he's been good, so, he's in the middle of remodeling and trying to make his place look nicer and better.
Sure.
So hopefully that whole area will.
Okay, well, so that key, you can get whatever that is, the detail. Once you get it figured out, tell Lou so you can put it on the plan.
Yeah, we've got some adjustments to do with that. There's an existing white vinyl fence here already that's gonna stay.
Yeah. All right. All right, anything else, you guys? I think we got most of it.
You appreciate your time?
Okay.
Sorry to say you. You hard for you.
So when you get a talk with homes, and then you're gonna figure that out, so you probably need a couple of weeks where you can get anything.
Yeah, we haven't gotten the peer review back yet.
That
so-
just got initiated, so.
Oh, yeah.
So we're expecting peer review comments, at least in their quote, they said they could do it in 2 weeks. We expect their comments back in 2 weeks and then move them sometime to address.
So you're looking at maybe August 15th.
Yeah, August 15th will be our goal.
All right. We have anything on there yet? So we can, could that be 8 o'clock?
That can be.
All right. Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. I hope
Thank
it's
you.
the last one. You're going home now.
Yeah.
I think we are. Thank you very much. Thanks, Hans. Thank you.
Thanks, good night.
See you later. Thank
They can't get it. But what if that's. Oh, you can do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, fine. So we don't need to get the application.
It's clear, the planning commission votes to the public hearing for 66 Winter Street until August 15th, 2023 at 8 p.m.
Second motion.
Have a motion, second, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ready to go forward, there is no.
Just down the left side, it's gonna show you like the minutes that you're into, so. I know you probably sent an email saying you want to change something, but if you give reference to where.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
of the minutes that we have.
Yeah. Appreciate it, Debbie. No, yes.
Okay, no. Well,
I am.
your reputation.
And so you can call tomorrow. I have a babysitting situation that is not ideal tonight. I'm not going to go soon.
No, you got it.
But call me tomorrow.
When you're free, just give me a buzz. I'll make time for you.
It's the point of view.
Yeah. And it's, I think it's great. For the record.
Good meeting.
Okay.
We're done.